Alright. So recently I just watched the new Sword Art Online Progressive Aria of a Starless Night, or Aria of a Starless Night, whatever, the new SAO movie recently. And before we get into this, I need to go over my thoughts on the show as a whole before we... Actually, screw that. Let's just get right into it. The movie's good, and I actually kind of like it. That's a surprise coming from me, considering I've hinted many times that I want to take a jab at SAO and everything about it. And don't worry, I do. And I'll get... There's so much... Look, there's so much about SAO that to talk about it in such a small video as a whole, you can't do it. You just can't. Most people who talk about SAO end up dedicating their entire channel just to talking about it because it's that much of a toxic thing to talk about. And I'll get into that later. In fact, I'm starting a new video series where I review every single episode of SAO in preparation for one giant video. You can think of this as the trailer for my actual review of the Sword Art Online Progressive Movie that will come later. Alright, let's actually get into it now. So, the movie is about Asuna and her friend Mito getting trapped inside SAO. It's basically the first two episodes if they were a cinematic theatrical release. And, what follows is their adventures in their attempts to get stronger and to beat the first floor of Castle Aincrad. Along the way, they meet Kirito as well. Because, well, of course they do. He's the main character. Or at least he was in the original show. Anyway, so what do I have to like about this? Honestly, with most things SAO related, I'm not going to give away what I actually think about the show and series as a whole. But I'm just letting you know that there are things I like and don't like about it. However, the movie is the first thing with SAO where I genuinely felt like the positives outweighed the negatives. A lot of people have said that this was just like a cheap repackaging of stuff that was already written into the series, and to that I say, yes it is. And that's why it's great, because you're taking something that was inherently flawed from the beginning and making it better by giving it more time and making it into something that can actually be consumed for people who previously hated it. Why do I think this? Because I think that the movie actually does a much better job at establishing the characters. In the beginning, we see that Asuna is so desperate to please her bitch-ass mom that she goes to great lengths, like being the best in athletics, being the best in academics, having only girls for friends because she goes to an only girl school. Like, she tries her hardest all the time, and her mom is almost never pleased. She never gives her time off because she's that kind of mom. And quite literally, Asuna was only raised to find a cool husband and get rich because, well, for anyone who's watched the Mother's Rosario arc of Sword Art Online, the mom thinks of her as a tool to make up for the fact that she herself was not born rich. Yeah, she's kind of a bitch in that way. But anyway, she makes this friend named Mito, who it turns out is a beta tester of Sword Art Online, and she's kind of sort of the parallel to Asuna in that she's a complete pariah socially, and nobody likes her except for video games because she's amazing at those, which are like the one thing Asuna's not great at. And now they're both stuck in a game together, of which Mito is badass in, and Asuna almost dies to the first wolf that she ends up fighting. So they kind of sort of become friends and they team up. So Asuna is a quick learner, as we establish as well, but like that's quickly fallen with dread as we see a guild get killed almost right away. And I think this is a brilliant scene because immediately they establish this movie as something to be reckoned with. Because like that was actually one of my biggest problems with the Sword Art Online show, is that it takes the concept of death so lightly. It pretends to be so serious about it, yet most of the time they'll just kill off characters without us ever getting to know, and like they expect us to feel for it as if they've been there for at least 3 episodes when they were really just there for half an episode. I'll do an entire video about that later. But like here even killing off some random nobodies that aren't actual characters definitely means something. I legitimately, watching this, I got the feel that these were like real people trapped in a real video game. And this is even more established by the fact that like the characters actually talk about things that real people would talk about in the movie. Like they wonder if the people who died really did die. They also wonder like if they also have this cute little conversation later like do you think video game characters talk to each other while walking or fast traveling or some shit? You know, it's actually pretty natural. Or like discussing how the beta testers screwed everyone over, like Kibao said at that one scene. You know, it actually feels really human. What's even more human is the fact that Asuna's best friend, who swore to protect her at all costs, sees her trapped in a mob and thinks and presumes that she is dead because there is no way a newbie like her would ever survive that many monsters at once, abandons her right after she promised that she would protect her at all costs. And it's a heartbreaking scene because she genuinely didn't mean to do it, but she also didn't think that there was any way she could have survived. So can you really say it was a dick move? I mean, most people won't really most people at the end of the day will put their own lives before all else. And I'm not saying that necessarily in a bad way. I'm saying that it is our natural instincts to want to survive in a life or death situation. And this is when she meets Kirito. About halfway through the movie, we meet the character who is the main character in the show. And he's kind of sort of, in the movie, he's portrayed as like this idealistic, badass, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Levi Ackerman type character who is mostly just there to help the protagonist succeed. He's not really a balanced character, and I don't get the vibe that he's supposed to be. This is a good role for Kirito because it allows him to be a super idealistic harem protagonist who's overpowered all the time without him completely ruining the story. Okay, let me just take a second to talk about that. I didn't like Kirito in the show. Most people who think about it didn't. And that's because, well, the reason I just described is that he's ridiculously overpowered. That's not necessarily a new argument, but it is true. And I can't help but realize that a lot of people love characters like, red-haired Shanks from One Piece or Levi Ackerman from Attack on Titan. You know, characters who are overpowered mostly because they aren't the main character. They're kind of there to, like, balance things out and to, like, demonstrate power. And I can't help but think that if they were the main characters, I guarantee they wouldn't be as popular as they are in their respective series. And that's kind of what they're doing with Kirito in the Progressive movie, or movies actually. There's already a next one announced, and I'm really excited for that. And I think that this is probably the best role they've ever put Kirito in. But that's personally just me. Yeah. I also really like the thing that he has with Asuna in this movie. Like I said, the characters actually act like people. Another example that I wanted to mention was that the girl Mito, who's like Asuna's best friend, her avatar is like this overly masculine guy character. And when I saw some of the concept art for one of the earlier scenes, I actually thought it was the Visago, one of the main villains from the War of the Underworld arc. And I was completely wrong. But, okay, that's a topic for another day. But the point is that, like, she has this overly masculine avatar, much like how people in-game are actually a lot different than you'd expect in real life, which, again, reflects real life. Okay, I really hate to say that how it reflects real life because it's fiction, and not everything's going to be 100% realistic. But, honestly, like, I think this movie pretty much nailed a lot of the realistic aspects of humanity for what it's given. Including Kirito and Asuna, they both feel really like a really likable and believable couple without being like too idealistic and fan servicey. There's even a scene where Kirito lends her his bath that he conveniently rented in his hotel, and I think in the manga version of Progressive, this is the part where he, like, accidentally walks in on her and it leads to a cliche, funny scene where she smacks him and basically just shuns him for a couple hours because, haha, man walk in on woman being naked, funny. But they didn't actually do that in the movie. Instead, they just kind of have her get dressed and come out, and then they resume their conversation like normal. And I really like that because it shows something that I think a lot of people like about SAO is that it takes its romance seriously, unlike most other series. But that's because it's all about the romance. Anyway, one of the things that I also really liked about the movie was the animation, and I mean, that's to be expected. It's a movie. Obviously, it has good animation, and it's modern day. SAO has had pretty good animation in the past couple of years, so yes, of course, it would have good animation. And the soundtrack, literally nobody dislikes the soundtrack of SAO. The only people who do are in denial because they're under the impression that there is literally nothing right about SAO. And they're wrong to some degrees. There are definitely problems with SAO, and I'll discuss them in my later videos. But I'm just talking about, like, the one thing about SAO that I, like, unobjectively just, like more than dislike. So, I do have a few complaints, actually. There's a character in the Progressive series called Argo who is only foreshadowed at the very end. I was genuinely surprised that they even had her in because I thought that with Mito being added that they weren't going to have her at all, but they did at the very, very last screen. So she's definitely going to play a part later, and I'm excited for that because she was a fun character. However, they didn't have her at all in this one, even though she did have some part in it as well. She kind of helped Asuna get used to customizations in the game and sold her some info as well. And she is Kirito's friend as well. So, yeah, I thought that she was a cool character, and honestly, like, while her not being in it kind of takes away from some of the characterization of the show, I do personally, here's my hot take, a lot of SAO fans were really pissed off when they saw that they were giving screen time to a new character instead of, well, Argo. I was personally fine with that as long as the new character was compelling and the story was still good, and it honestly was, in my opinion, so there we go, that's fine. Another complaint that I actually have was that they reduced Egil's role in the battle, because, like, in the show version of the fight, at one point, Kirito and Asuna are on the ground and the boss, Ilfang, is about to kill them, and then Egil comes into the rescue at the last minute, and it's really cool because it's one of the few times he actually does something. In the movie, from what I remember, he doesn't do that at all. Forget I said this if he did, but I don't have footage of the movie yet to back up my claims, so honestly, I can't really vouch for that. And it's been a while since I've seen it now. But, like, they kind of reduced his role to just being on the sidelines completely. And hopefully they give him more in the future. Honestly, that's also probably fine just because they're giving it more to Mito, who, like I said, is a pretty compelling character. But otherwise, I didn't really have that many problems with the movie. I thought it was pretty good, even if it was a repackaging. Actually, especially if it was a repackaging. So, yeah, I thought... Oh, one more thing. In the scene where Mito betrays Asuna unintentionally, then, like, they actually reference a chapter in the light novel that never made it into the show called First Day, where Kirito teams up with another beta tester, and they go after these plant-like monsters for a quest, and the guy betrays him and ends up getting himself killed, and that's how Kirito gets his sword. The movie references this by having Mito and Asuna fight those things instead of Kirito. And then Mito goes to fight some EXP thing that's kind of like I don't know. I don't really remember what it is. It's like the Ragu Rabbit from episode 8 or the Amazy Daisy from Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door. That's the best example I can think of. And she goes after it because it will give her better equipment or EXP. But Asuna gets surrounded by those plant creatures from the light novel, and this is where Mito decides to abandon her thinking that she's dead, and then Kirito saves her right afterwards. So I thought that was a cute little reference to the light novel, and yeah, that's about it. Personally, I thought this was genuinely the best thing with SAO we've gotten so far, and I look forward to the next movie. And you guys should look forward to some of the next content for Team DissTube, because we're going to be starting a new mini-series in which I watch and review every single episode of Sword Art Online to prepare for a giant documentary about everything about Sword Art Online. Thank you, and have great